Mr. Lane, call your next witness, please.
All right, sir. We'll call Captain Coons.
Who's witness on this speak? Mr. Lane.
Oh, I am, sir. I'm sorry.
Sir, if you could please come to the front of the courtroom. And before you have to see on the witness stand, raise your right hand. Swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth. Please have a seat. Respond to questions from Mr. Lane. And that's also whose witness will this be for the statement from Mr. Smackson. May I proceed with it?
Thank you, Judge. Would you please pull your chair up towards the jury over there? And
As I said, it's bolted to the floor.
I'm used to being an attorney. We give you a chance to run. So please address your answers to the jury. I noticed you're turning your head. Do you have a hearing problem in one ear?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have a hearing problem in one ear?
I have a hearing problem in both ears, yes, sir.
Can you tell this jury a little bit about yourself, where you were raised, and just quickly go through your education?
Before that, can you state his first name?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
My name is J. Oliver Coons, J-A-Y, Oliver common spelling, Coons, C-O-O-N-S.
Well, let me back up for a moment. Did I employ you to come here to testify as an expert witness?
Yes, sir, you did.
And an expert in the use of force?
Yes, sir.
And I asked you to review certain documents and look at things and then form an opinion that would be expressed to this jury?
Yes, sir, you did.
What is your current duty assignment?
I'm currently a captain with the Harris County Sheriff's Office down in Houston, Texas.
How long have you been a captain with the Harris County Sheriff?
Since 1 March 1997.
Do you have a military resume?
Very small one. I joined the United States Marine Corps in 1975. I was honorably discharged in 1979.
You were lucky that just came in and stayed in Vietnam.
Very lucky.
What was your duty assignment as a military officer?
Well, I wasn't an officer. I was enlisted, and I was an infantryman.
What do the Marines call them?
Grunts.
Yeah, grunts, give them an MOS?
0311.
After serving in the United States Marine Corps, where did you go after that?
My mother and father had moved to the Houston area, so I followed them here, and I was going to complete my bachelor's degree at Sam Houston State University. I got into policing at that time, first at the Splendora Police Department, and then the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, which is just to the north of Houston.
And if my memory serves me correct, Sam Houston University is kind of a premier law enforcement university, teaching law enforcement.
I believe it is, yes, sir.
So you're a ring knocker from there, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what did you study at your first basic level at Sam Houston?
It's an old-fashioned degree. It's called Law Enforcement and Police Science. You don't see that degree anymore.
And were you working as a police officer at that time?
Yes, sir.
Had you gone through the TCO certification process at that time?
I had it, the Harris County Sheriff's Academy in Humble, Texas.
And while you were going through schooling there doing your basic, what was your certification level?
You start at you're talking about TCO?
Yes.
TCOs at the time, I had a basic certification.
What does TCO stand for?
TCO is Texas Commission on Law Enforcement.
And what job do they have in Texas?
TCO and their predecessor, TCLOS, regulates peace officers in the state of Texas. I have to have a license to be a peace officer, like you have to have a license to drive. They also regulate the conditions of licensure. What does it take, what type of training does it take to be a peace officer? And this is across the board from, let's say, a Dallas police officer, a Texas Highway Patrol trooper, or a deputy sheriff like myself. They also set psychological standards, as you've heard here. Also, when police officers get into problems, there are things you can get into where TCO will consider whether or not they should suspend your license as a peace officer. Of course, again, like driving the car, if you don't have a license, you can't drive the car. But if I don't have my license, I can't be a cop.
when you began to get into policing in Texas, did TCO require a psychological evaluation?
Yes, sir, they did.
And has that continued since you know of?
To my knowledge, yes.
And what would have been the first one you took?
1979.
And after you go through that psychological evaluation, is the individual that is qualified to give those for TCO, are they required to notify the state of Texas as to whether or not the individual is suitable for police work or not?
They are not. They fill out a specific TCO form that they send to the agency who you're testing for. As part of the employment package, the employment agency has to set forth a huge stack of forms. And one of those is you have successfully completed and approved a psychological evaluation.
Well, can a department use that in evaluating whether or not they want to offer you employment?
Well, yes, if you don't pass it, so let's say I go to another agency, I want to join the Dallas Police Department, they're going to require I undergo a psychological evaluation, and let's say I fail it. Well, then they are prohibited from employing me as a peace officer. If I pass it, now, if they see something they don't like, they go, no, we don't like this guy.
You've heard Roy Oliver testify that he took 3 of them. Would that be standard operating procedure as far as you're concerned?
It could be. One was for fire. Then I believe the other 2 were for peace officer. One would be for the itty bitty city with a great big name. And then the other one would be for Balch Springs. Each agency you go to, even though I've been a peace officer in Texas since 1979, like I say, if I want to come up here to Dallas and join DPD, I'm going to have to take a psychological evaluation.
So that they can look at you?
To make sure that, well, it's a state law that when you join a law enforcement agency in Texas, you must take a psychological evaluation.
And your first duty assignment with the Harris County Sheriff's Department?
The jail there in Melbourne.
And how long were you in the jail? Does that require a T-close at that time, T-close certification?
It did at the time because everybody we hired was a peace officer. Now, since we've developed, like the Dallas Sheriff's Office has, a county jailer group. They're not peace officers, they run the jails, while most of your peace officers, deputy sheriffs, are out on the street. In Texas, generally, in your career, you kind of bounce back and forth. I've done law enforcement duties, I've done jail duties, as I've gone into that.
So, I'll run the parallel, your education and what you were doing as far as the Harris County Sheriff. I assume you've been with Harris County since you began there?
Since 1982, yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk and just help us go. I was in Sam Houston, furthering my education, and I was with the Harris County Sheriff's Department. What is happening as you go up the ranks?
Not much on the educational side. I was taking a lot of training. I went to the FBI Hazardous Devices School in Huntsville, Alabama. Became an FBI certified bomb technician. I was one of the original members of the Sheriff's Department Bomb Squad. And so far, so good. Did that, promoted to lieutenant in 1988, went to patrol, did emergency management, then did a rotation back to the jail. I was in the jail a while, came back out of the jail. Well, while I was there, I started the Bill Blackwood Law Enforcement Management Institute in Texas, which is down at Sam Houston State University. Completed that in 1996. It's been a while since I've been back to Sam. I met some of my old professors, and they said, when are you going to stop messing around, come back for your master's degree? So they talked me into that. Started my master's degree in 1996. Finished that.
What were you doing in the Sheriff's Department?
I was a lieutenant, then promoted in 1997 to captain.
Okay, I want to go through the education and your job, and then I want to talk about what you did while you were in the sheriff's department.
Okay. I continued with, at that time I was in the jail and made captain in '97, and then I was the night captain. Basically, I was pretty much in charge of the shop during the hours of the nighttime. At that time, I was completing my master's degree. I stayed out a year and then went back for my doctorate and started my doctorate in 1999.
Did you receive your doctorate?
Yes, sir. I received my doctorate in criminal justice in May of 2004.
Does everybody call you Dr. Coons other than your wife?
Well, they call me a number of things.
Did that education help you promote as far as Harris County is concerned?
No, that's a strict civil service system. You compete against your peers. In my day, there was a written test, there was an interview process, and a few other things that added up to a score. Now it's all an assessment center.
And so, what has been your primary function since you've been in police force? I mean, have you been riding desk or have you been in the streets?
A little bit of both. Like I said, I've been on the bomb squad. As a lieutenant, I was out on the street a good bit. As a captain, currently I'm a district commander, a patrol district commander.
And how big is that district?
It's, my district has about 444,000 people. I have about, I'm TO at about 200 deputies. I've got
we don't know what those kind of terms mean.
Table of organization. My authorized strength is about 200 deputy sergeants, 3 lieutenants, and myself. We're down to about 173 right now.
Do you have any other outside agencies that are attached to your task force?
Yes, we're currently testing a decentralization program in Harris County where we've taken robbery detectives and they've actually assigned robbery detectives into my command out in the district. Along with them come, I've got 2 FBI agents, we have access to ATF agents. We're working very closely with the Houston Police Department. We also have the Texas Department of Public Safety special agents working with us as well.
And as a sheriff in any city, does the sheriff department have concurrent jurisdiction with the local police agencies?
Yes, sir, it does. A sheriff in Texas has jurisdiction anywhere in that county, regardless of whether or not it's an incorporated city or unincorporated.
So, your duties as a patrol officer, you said through Dr. Hayden's in that position.
Yes, sir.
And certainly not taking issue with Dr. Hayden, his education and everything. But what's the difference, since you have FBI agents attached to your task force and you supervise them, what is the difference between a Texas peace officer that's a street cop compared to FBI agents?
Well, one, and granted, the FBI's had a few issues here lately, but I've got to tell you, it's an outstanding organization. I had the chance to work very closely with them when I went to the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Just a top-notch organization filled with exceptionally high-performing people who are just very, very, very qualified. The problem of it is, the FBI does several things very, very well. Very long-term, complex investigations that can span years of time, can span all the states in the United States, foreign countries. It is amazing the length and breadth of the investigations they do. Secondly, they do very, very well is in-depth undercover investigations, organized crime. It was the FBI that finally pretty much put a major dent in the mafia in New York City and up in the Northeast. And they did that by implanting agents into the mafia for years. These people couldn't hardly contact their families. They, for all intents and purposes, became mafiosos in order to get in and get into the organization. So they do that very well. So please don't ever think that I'm, for whatever reason, down-talking the FBI. I have tremendous respect. What they don't do is day-to-day uniform patrol operations. If you call 911, an FBI agent is not going to show up at your door. If they do, you're in a lot of trouble. They do these investigations and they allow the local criminal matters, if you will, to be handled by the local police. The FBI is a planning organization. When, now, I believe it was Dr. Hayden talked about his SWAT work with the FBI. Every major field office in the FBI has a SWAT team attached to it, made up of FBI agents. Again, incredibly talented individuals. It's the FBI that controls the bomb program in the United States. Again, wonderful folks. So what they do is, when they're going after a high-risk arrest, or they're going to do a high-risk operation of some sort, they do a lot of planning, they do a lot of prep work, they bring a lot of intelligence in it. Keep in mind, again, the FBI can reach out and they can track the suspect down when that suspect was born. They can talk to their teachers, their next-door neighbors. They have the capability to do that. So when they go on a SWAT raid or they're executing a high-risk warrant, they put a lot of planning and detail into that operation. Well, when you call 911 and say, I've got a real problem over here, the officer, the deputy sheriff, the police officer that shows up, they're going on what's on their MDT and what you told the dispatcher 4 or 5 minutes ago.
Excuse me, what is an MDT?
I'm sorry. Well, it's not even called an MDT anymore. Yeah, back in my day, you had radio, you had silent, congratulations, you got a patrol car. Now they look like these new F-35s. It's basically a ruggedized laptop computer. It fits a specific mount in the car. You open it up, it's got a cellular connection on it, and basically you get all of your information through that. You don't run once and once anymore with radio. You do them right there. You do your reports right there. Your crashes right there. Everything's done right there. And the fun part about that is when the system crashes and old folks like me just get on our steno pads and the kids don't know what to do. They don't have a clue.
When you began your patrol work, were you just a regular street cop, for a better word?
Yes, sir.
Just making calls, patrolling? From your experience, by the way, have you ever been involved in any shootings?
Yes, sir, I have.
I know it's not something to be proud of, but can you share with us your experience of being involved in shooting?
It happens very quickly. It is very unexpected. It doesn't happen like you think it's going to happen. And just as quick as it begins, it's over.
Have you been involved in 3 of them?
Yes, sir.
Since you've been a Harris County Sheriff's Deputy?
I was involved in one in the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, and I've been involved in 2 shootings at the Harris County Sheriff's Office.
Where you were actually involved in a police police involved call?
Actually, the first one in Montgomery County, yes. The second and third, no, both of those were off-duty incidents.
When you have your officers that are involved in any type of allegations or actually use of excessive force, do you do the investigations too? You look into them?
A captain, such as myself, reviews all use of force reports for every deputy under his or her chain of command. So anytime my deputies use force, they're required to fill out a report. The sergeant is required to come to the scene and just talk with everybody at that point in time. The report is made, it goes up chain, gets reviewed by the watch commander, who is a lieutenant. Ultimately, it comes to me. And of course, in these days, it's all computerized now. I look over, I read each report, I read all the supplements to the report, anything anybody has to say, and then I have the capability now in my office, I can pull up the dash cam video, I can pull up the body worn camera video, not only of the involved officers, but the officers who may also be present on that scene. I look at that, if I see an issue, if it's something, let's say a training issue, if someone's not doing a good search, something like that, I can handle that at my level, make sure that deputy gets more training. If I see a violation, I discuss it with my boss and we figure out what we're going to do.
We've heard a lot about Graham versus Conrad, but the reality is that Texas peace officers, street cops, are really governed by the Texas Penal Code.
Yes, sir.
And in that penal code, the question over and over again is asked, was the officer's conduct reasonable?
Yes, sir.
Can you share with this jury what you perceive to be the definition of the standards to determine whether or not an officer's acts were reasonable?
Sure. Basically, what's the nature of the crime? That is, how serious an offense are we dealing with here? Secondly, what's the threat to the officer, a second officer, or any third party? Third is the individual attempting to escape custody or attempting to flee. So you put those issues together. Also, something as simple as, let's say, the size of the suspect and the size of the officer. Are there weapons used? What is the nature of the crime? A lot of things go into that. And the important thing about a use of force is, even though there are general policies or general guidelines or certainly the law, each and every use of force has to be reviewed based on its own merits. What were the factors to be considered in this particular use of force?
Well, and what does that mean? The factors as from the officer who used the excessive force and deadly force?
Well, the officer that used the force. In other words, what did the officer know? The totality of circumstances. What did the officer know? When did he or she know that? And what would a reasonable officer have done, knowing what that officer knew at the time the event occurred?
When you make that balancing test, you try to determine what that officer's training and experience level is?
Yes.
Why is that?
Let's say you take an officer, been on the force a year. They have a basic academy, they have a basic FTO program, they're handling the situation. They might handle it one way due to their training, their level of training, their level of experience. Now, you take a 20-year veteran who's also been with the SWAT team for 15 years, has extensive training behind them. You're going to expect them to handle it perhaps a little differently. So training and experience it means a good deal.
Well, I mean, from a captain's standpoint, by the way, what are your certifications with TICO?
I currently, I've got a basic peace officer license, intermediate, advanced, master peace officer certification. I've also got an instructor certification.
Was there any higher certification than that?
That's it.
And while I'm on that subject, we heard Dr. Hayden talk about a concept called foresight. Have you been involved with that particular program?
Yes, I am. I'm certified by the Force Science Institute.
And when did you do that?
February of this year.
And why did you do that?
It opens up a facet of investigation, especially when we're dealing with use of force. That in one way, we kind of know it's there, but on the other hand, we really haven't put a lot of, hasn't really been a part of our investigations. It has been in traffic accidents, traffic crashes for years, and that's human response time.
Well, why do you think Lewinsky and that bunch became interested in response time?
Because and I'm sure y'all have heard, let's say an officer is involved in a shooting, he shoots a suspect multiple times, and then he shoots the suspect in the back 3 times. And we all think, how in the world, how could that be justified? you get into human mechanics. It takes a human being approximately 0.18 seconds to be facing you and then turn their back. It's about 0.20 seconds if I'm firing across my body like this and then to turn away from you. So what we're finding is, again, take an officer shooting somebody in the back, that when the officer perceives that they need to initiate a use of force, they determine what is going on, what action they're going to take, and then they implement that action. That gives the suspect a good bit of time to move. And that's how events like that happen.
And so what did force science, what did you take away from force science that you now use when you're going to talk to this jury?
Well, it's critical. It's a critical element in finding out what went on. Again, as I said, use of force, especially shooting incidents, occur very, very quickly. There is a brief moment of time, and you've got to be able to slow that time down, expand it out, and put the officer's ability, or human beings' ability to make decisions, take in data, analyze that data, make decisions, and then take an action on that decision.
Have you testified in other cases involving use of force?
Yes, sir.
And did you form a side business other than being a captain in the sheriff's department where you're offering your services in the area of use of force?
I have.
And I mean, is this something that you do on the side for it?
I do. I'm also an adjunct professor at San Luis State University. I teach in the graduate program. I teach both ethics and organizational administration. I also teach statistics at the University of Houston downtown in the undergraduate program.
Well, you feel like you're qualified as an expert to talk to this jury about use of force and the scientific part of it, the human factors.
Yes, sir, I do.
Did you go through all the material that, did we give you all the material that you asked for?
Yes, sir, you do.
And you were here when Dr. Hayden testified, you were here while Roy Oliver testified.
Yes, sir, I was.
You know, Grant Frederick's report, did you go through the grand jury testimony that Dr. Hayden said he went through?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you feel like you received all the information that you needed to form an opinion so you could share it with this jury?
Yes, sir, I did.
And you feel that you're qualified to do that?
I do, yes, sir.
Did you form an opinion as to whether or not Roy Oliver's, what he did on April 29th of 2017, at the time this discharge of this weapon occurred, whether or not what he did was reasonable?
Yes, sir, I have.
And what is that opinion?
The actions of Roy Oliver during this incident were reasonable.
And did you bring some exhibits that you prepared that might assist this jury in understanding a little in depth about how you made that decision?
Yes, sir, I did.
Judge, I need to step down and address the notes.
He will after our break. Members of the jury, we're going to take our after break. And so we'll be back in 15 minutes. All I Thank you, Sheriff. You may be seated. Sir, I'll remind you, you have a seat unless you're going to step down to your...
I'm going to discuss it.
Okay, once you have a seat, I'll remind you, you're still under the oath that I gave to you previously.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Ray.
Captain, you were, of course, I said here while Dr. Hayden testified.
Yes, sir.
And you were here when he agreed with me on every step in that 9 seconds that Dr. Oliver was involved in. He agreed with me that that was good police work.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So let's talk about that before we get into the actual discharge of the weapon. As a experienced street cop captain of a task force, almost 200 street cops, when Roy Oliver and Gross showed up at that house Was there anything in that situation where the approach to everyone that dealt with was something else there that you found not to be appropriate?
No, I thought it was entirely appropriate. They were very conversational, they were very low-key. In modern policing, we use a term called de-escalation, and that's exactly what they were doing. They weren't trying to identify people, to issue citations, or take any punitive action. They were just trying to make everybody go on.
Have you ever seen that many kids in one house?
It surprised me, especially when I saw the house. That was a feat.
Well, I mean, would you agree with Dr. Hayden that would have been kind of a unique situation that a patrol officer would find themselves in with that many young people?
There were a bunch. House parties are actually kind of popular. Those happen from time to time, and also
Especially
they're
when parents are
dangerous.
out of town.
Only when the parents are out of town. Yes, sir.
Well, was there something about the number of young adults that were coming out of there and how they were being directed? Anything about that caused you any concern?
No, not only no concern, but again, both officers, Officer Gross and Officer Oliver, again, very low-key in their approach. They weren't authoritarian. They weren't barking orders at these people. They weren't being derogatory towards them. They were being very conversational.
You saw what happened inside the house. Gross was talking to the kid whose parents owned the loan, and Oliver was doing as he said, I was just checking for officer safety. Good police work.
Very good police work. Clearly, Officer Gross was the lead officer, and Officer Oliver was the backup officer. They were working as a team. They worked as a team throughout this entire thing. Officer Gross got the responsible party in the house. Officer Gross was talking with him. Meanwhile, Officer Oliver, in support, is going around. He's checking rooms. You could have a person passed out in there. You could have other issues going on in there. But he did the security sweep of the home. So again, they're working together in very close partnership.
From your experience of in the military and as being a police captain, is there an advantage to having worked with somebody for a long period of time?
So absolutely.
What is the advantage to a police officer? And even a soldier, what's the advantage?
Well, when you know somebody, you know how they react, you know their personality, you know their strengths, their weaknesses, and they know your strengths and your weaknesses. You can work very well together as a team, and just a look, a raise of an eyebrow, you know what's going on. You get comfortable working with each other. Okay, if you're in the lead, you know, you stand there, I'll stand over here, and that doesn't need to be verbalized. You can kind of go off each other's energy. Also, too, something as simple, it's not what they say over the radio, but it's the tone of their voice. I could be having a discussion in my office with somebody, and I have a radio monitor. And it's not what one of my deputies is saying, it's the tone of his or her voice over that radio, and I go, excuse me, stop, just to listen to us.
I think we all can relate to that. As children, it wasn't so much what our mothers said to us, it was how she said it to us.
And using all three names, yes.
Yes. Oh, yes, but I mean, is that a human factor that cops and soldiers pretty well just learn to rely on the officers that they've worked with and know?
It's critical. It's absolutely critical, yes.
As those shots were fired, when you heard them on the video, did you have any question that those were gunshot fire?
No, none whatsoever. None whatsoever.
And did you think that they were coming from one weapon or more than one weapon?
It could have been 1, 2, perhaps 3 weapons.
From looking at it, what was your initial reaction when you heard the shots? What did you think an officer, a reasonable officer in those circumstances would do?
Something drastic had happened. The entire situation has changed. Now we've got gunfire out on the street.
And as those officers came out of the house, would you have expected them to go get their vehicle and drive it up there so they had cover or anything? Or would you expect the good officer to go where the fire came from?
That's what cops do. Cops run towards the gunfire, and that's exactly what they did. Again, working as this team, Officer Gross immediately peeled off and started heading in the direction that the officers believed the gunfire came from. Officer Oliver let him take the lead, and as the support officer, as the backup officer, he went and he up-armed to his AR-15.
What was your opinion of Officer Oliver going for a patrol rifle?
I thought it was an excellent decision. Because again, the officers, what they do know, what they reasonably suspect, is a number of shots had been fired. Was this an active shooter? Was this, were they about to get in the middle of a gang shootout? It could have been any one of a number of things, but the critical point is that they didn't know. But what they had to do was prepare themselves for the worst. So again, Officer Gross scouting ahead, good move. He's getting eyes down range. And then Officer Oliver going and getting that AR-15, and I say AR-15, that it's the weapon platform. It was
when you guys say weapon platform, I'm not sure everybody understands what you're talking about.
It's kind of like a Ford Mustang. Well, it can have different engines in it. It can be painted different colors. There's different models. It's still a Ford Mustang. That's the Mustang platform. You can do a lot of different things with it.
So we would, normal folks would call that an AR-15.
AR-15, yeah.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Taking that weapon out of his vehicle, did you think that was a reasonable officer's response?
Absolutely.
And why is that?
It gives the officer the advantage of distance, of the ability to deliver pinpoint fire, to deliver consistent fire. And the magazines for AR-15s usually are either 20-round magazines or 30-round magazines. So you can, if something is really going wrong at the end of the street, you have the ability to have greater firepower to fight.
Well, from what you heard on the tape and how they reacted, do you think that they knew the general area where that gunfire was coming from?
That the officers knew?
Yes.
They had a pretty good idea of where the gunfire was coming from.
And do you think by Officer Gross going up the middle of the street towards the fire, was that a good police move on his part?
Tactically, no. Approaching, yes, good idea. But the problem of it is he's right out in the middle of the street. He's making himself a target. What he should have done tactically is hug up against the homes and proceeded down, going right in front of the houses. That way he can clear the houses and the space between the houses, but he can also clear the street and across the street the other houses too. It tends to be darker in front of the house, and people aren't expecting you to be walking right in front of the house. They're expecting you to be using the sidewalks or the street.
Well, of course, that would have been best for his safety, but he thought that going up that street would be the fastest way to get to where that fire was, right?
This is true.
You saw on that tape that he was giving commands to cars, or at least one car, before they got up on top of the other street there. Is that appropriate action on the part, reasonable on the part of the police officer?
Absolutely. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They're trying to get information so they can make decisions. He's seeing a car move, and he tells that car, stop the car. The car stopped. You can see he looks inside the car. He doesn't see any weapons. It was a male driver, a female passenger. They're complying. He eliminated that as a threat, went and moved on.
Now, I think we break this down into Officer Oliver walking and then him beginning to run. You heard his testimony as to taking the weapon out, chambering around, getting it ready to fire.
Yes, sir.
Walking with it, putting the sling over his head, holding it in a downward, I don't know what he called it, but the procedure that he said he did, was that reasonable?
Yes, that was reasonable, and that's what's taught in the rifle class, yes.
Then, did you hear, or what did you think changed the whole perception out there? What did Gross do that changed the scenario?
From the video, you can see Officer Oliver doing exactly that. He gets the rifle out of the vehicle, He chambers around by pulling the charging handle back, letting him go home, and he adjusts the reticle on the sight. But if you'll see his shadow, he's got the weapon by the handle and he's got it down at his side. This is a pretty relaxed way to carry an AR-15 as opposed to a low ready or a high ready. So again, it's pretty relaxed, pretty nonchalant. He's walking up there, and then Officer Gross gets on the radio and starts radioing in the license number of the vehicle. And his voice is going up. Both his volume is going up and the pitch of his voice is going up. You can clearly see that Officer Gross is becoming, I don't want to say excited, that's not the word, but there's agitation, there's fear in his voice, there's frustration that something here is going wrong. They're not complying with my orders.
Without even knowing Officer Gross, when you heard that, is that what you perceived?
Absolutely.
And then you heard, of course, the colorful language. From a practical standpoint, why do police officers use that colorful language?
When you're under stress, you revert to your training, and when you're under stress, all the niceties tend to get put aside, and you're trying to bring your point home. Stop the car. Stop it now. And from time to time, some salty language gets its way in there. We're human beings.
But I mean, that, I bet you look at countless tapes, that's not something uncommon. That seems to be a trait that police officers use salty language after high-stress situations.
It's extremely common. Now that we have a dash camera, we have the body-worn cameras, and we're watching this, more and more we're seeing when officers are in high-stress situations, they can use some colorful language.
What is the significance to a trained police officer of calling out the license plate numbers?
You're trying to identify that vehicle for the record. You're trying to get at least the license number. Hopefully, if it's not stolen, it can come back to an address.
Okay, well, we're kind of halfway up there, let's say 4.5 seconds, and then we see Oliver begin to run.
Yes.
At what point do you think a reasonable officer would start from a high walk to a run like that?
When he hears his partner's voice start going up, the volume, the urgency in his partner's voice, that this is a situation that's deteriorating, number one. Number two, he doesn't know what his partner sees. He can hear things are going wrong up there. I don't know what's going wrong up there. I need to get up there and I need to support my partner, because that's what Officer Oliver's role was in this, to support Officer Gross. That's why he starts running.
So you heard Dr. Hayden agree with me that at that point, Officer Oliver had done good police work.
Absolutely good police work, yes, both of them.
And then we see him beginning to run. What do you see in that video about when he begins to run? What is significant in the video when you see Oliver starting to run? What was he doing that you could see in that video?
What was Officer Oliver doing?
Yes, sir.
He was getting up with his partner. He knew his partner needed immediate help, immediate support, and he needed to get up there absolutely as fast as he possibly could.
And I asked Dr. Hayden, what a backup officer is. Do you agree with his definition of what a backup officer is?
What was his definition?
There to be a backup, to protect the lead officer. You're his backup.
Exactly that, yes.
And I mean, is that the function that you train as a trainer, as a professional in this field, that you train that backup officer to protect that lead officer?
He or she protects the lead officer. They're checking the surroundings. They're looking for threats, but they're there to support the lead officer, yes.
Well, what would a backup officer, a trained backup officer be doing from that running standpoint, going up to that car? We're talking about 3 seconds at that point. What should he have been doing? Should he have been scanning the whole neighborhood and trying to figure out what's going on, or should he be following the lead of that lead officer?
Well, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. Now Officer Oliver is running towards his partner, and at this time, let me back up for just a minute. Again, it's his partner that's doing the scanning. You can see on the video, he's got his flashlight, he's checking for threats as he's walking up there. Good job. He's doing a good job. He's trying to clear those threats, because what you don't want to do is go past something and then get shot in the back. That's a bad day at the office. So he's clearing those threats, he's moving up. Well, now you've got Officer Oliver, he's basically, and I'm repeating myself, but he's in support of Officer Gross. So as he's going up there, his view should be mostly on Gross and the object of Gross's attention, which is that Impala.
Well, and I asked Dr. Hayden who was Officer Gross's backup, and he said Officer Oliver.
Correct.
The question then became, who's Officer Oliver's backup?
That nobody. He was on his own.
Kind of a double duty all of a sudden, take himself and the lead officer.
That's correct.
And under those circumstances, they were pretty much out in the middle of the street under a street light. You've been to the scene of this incident.
I have, yes, sir.
You know what it looks like.
Yes, sir.
You did that as far as your investigation is concerned.
That's correct.
And you were out there at night.
Yes.
I mean, what's your opinion of 2 officers in the middle of the street under an illuminated street light?
They were in a terrible position tactically. They were fully illuminated. There was nothing. If somebody was just a few feet away, could have easily shot both of them. They were completely exposed.
Now, you listened to those videos and said you're a little hard of hearing, but did you ever hear anyone warning Oliver or Brooks, either one, about the people that did the shooting were in another car and they've already left?
No.
Did you ever hear anybody say to Officer Oliver or Gross, they're not in that black car right there, that's not them?
No.
Did you read Officer Oliver's testimony where he said, well, I think maybe somebody told me or pointed towards that car?
Yes.
All of those circumstances, put it all together in a professional mind. What did you have going? What do you think a reasonable officer had going on out there?
A reasonable officer is giving directions to the driver of that car. That driver is required by law to obey the officer's directions. The first car did just that. Everything was fine. This car is not doing that. The driver is disregarding the officer. This is a cause for concern. Because again, it's not what the officers know at this time, it's actually what they don't know. Is this car involved in something? Is it not? But why is it not obeying my directions?
Now let me ask you something right there. You know, if we're watching on TV, we always hear on the TV programs, police stop, police stop. If you're in full uniform in the middle of the street, is it a requirement that you say police stop if you're in your uniform?
No, it's not.
Do you find that to be something, some officers might do that, but under high stress situations, you see that happening?
It can happen. It just depends. It depends on the officer. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It
Do
doesn't
you
hurt.
fault Gross or Oliver, either one, for not screaming, police stop?
I don't fault them for it, no. Because again, they are in full uniform and they're standing under a street light.
All right. Now, let's talk about what you've learned through all of your training and your experience, and particularly what you learned through Force Science, because that seems to be the gold standard that everybody talks about.
Yes, sir.
We're down to now 1 or 2 seconds time. I assume that we're dealing with this. Do you have exhibits here that can help this jury understand the concept of OODA loop?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell this jury what that term, because they're going to hear it, what it stands for, OODA loop?
Sure. The OODA loop is called Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And it was invented by an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel in the early 50s. He was a fighter pilot. And his goal was to keep, if you can keep your opponent in one end of the OODA loop, and we'll get to that in a minute, what they can't do is they can't make decisions and they can't act. So, and the way he would prove that is with his squadron mates. He would say, I can start out in a position of disadvantage, and within 40 seconds using the OODA loop, I can change to a position of advantage. He never lost that bet. So what Colonel Boyd was trying to do is use it as a tactical tool. In other words, if I can keep you guessing, you're not going to be able to execute your war plan, and I can. But it's also been used by the tactical community and law enforcement to show the decision process a person has to go through from first making an observation to at last taking an action.
So, in the exhibits that we've had marked here, would it be a benefit to this jury for you to explain the OODA loop to them?
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
All right, let's, if I can get Matt to come help us, just can we...
Y'all go ahead. Members of the jury, this is Matt Thompson. He'll be assisting the defense.
Matt has come to the bar and waiting for the results.
I'm sorry?
Can I move up here so I can see?
Yes, sir. Please do.
And these are admitted for demonstrative purposes.
The defense exhibits 17 through 20 are admitted for demonstrative purposes only. Members of the jury, what that means is, admitted for demonstrative purposes, you'll be able to look at it in court, but you won't be able to take it with you during deliberations. You'll recall that. Mr. Lane, you may proceed. Doctor, if you would, please make sure you keep your voice up so Mr. Wood can hear you. Court reporter. Go ahead. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Is that you, Mr. Lane?
Certainly.
Keep your voice up so she can hear you.
Show them.
I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson?
What we're going to
Your
do.
sole function is to make sure everybody can see that.
Yeah, we're
Step back a little
going to
bit.
do this. We'll come here. Doctor, go ahead, or Captain, go ahead. We see OODA loop up there. Is that this term that you guys in this profession use?
It is, and this is the OODA loop I was discussing right here.
Can you explain, this is, I think, 17, is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you explain that to this jury, what they're looking at, and what it means to you as an expert?
Sure. This is a graphic representation of Colonel Boyd's concept of how we make decisions and how we act. And what Colonel Boyd said was the first thing we have to do is observe it. If we don't observe it, it's like asking us right now what color cars are driving by on the street. Well, we don't know because we're not observing it. So we make observations through any of our 5 senses. Once we make that observation, we have to orientate ourselves as to what it is. So we think about it, we gather new information. We also depend a lot on our experiences. If we get up in the morning and we smell something coming from the kitchen, probably know it's coffee. We don't have to go and discover that. We know it. So once we orientate as to what that observation is, what it means to us, then we need to make a decision. So what are we going to do? We're going to, at least me, I'm going to start away, I'm going to grab a coffee cup, I'm going to pour myself a cup of coffee. Once I make that decision, then I'm going to act on it. And I'm going to do just that. Now, Colonel Boyd, for tactical purposes, said if you keep the enemy here, they can't get to here. They can't do an action if we just take them down here.
Can you repeat that for
Sure.
ladies and gentlemen?
Basically, what Colonel Boyd said, if you can keep your opponent in this part of the OODA loop, well, then they can't get here. If they can't make a decision, they can't act. If they can't act, you win. But for our purposes here today, what this is doing is it's showing us that this is how human beings make decisions. They go from an observation to an action. Each one of these also has a specific time frame. It takes time to go from here to here. We don't make we don't make an observation and instantly react. Every now and again, I'm trying to call my wife on the cell phone. And it rings. I figured, well, she's not picking up. She's an OR nurse, so I figured she's in the OR. And just about the time I'm reaching to disconnect, what do you think happens? She answers the phone. Do you think I can stop? Nope, because I've already committed to make the decision to hang up the phone. So it takes about a quarter of a second to observe and make that observation. It takes anywhere from a quarter of a second to about a third of a second to orientate. What is that? It's like trying to, on a foggy night, you're looking at a road sign, you know it's a road sign, but you don't know quite what it says. It takes about another quarter of a second to a half a second to make that decision. What are you going to do? You've seen it, you figured out what it is, now what in the world are you going to do? And that can take from about a quarter to about a half a second. Initiating an action takes about a quarter of a second. So to get from this point here to that point there, with a normal human being, takes about a minimum of 1 second to a half a second or longer. Excuse me, to a second and a half or longer.
Now, the OODA loop and all of those times, was that something you dreamed up, or was this as a result of many studies and Lewinsky? And I mean, we heard Dr. Hayden say he was involved in helping out on forming these opinions. Is that where that information comes from?
Yeah, no, this is certainly not my work. This isn't my research at all. This is Dr. Lewinsky, and several people that have been involved in this line of research. It's gone on since actually the early 1800s.
Now, we didn't hear from Dr. Hayden talk about the OODA loop, but would this be something that you would have learned there at Force Science to use that term?
Yes, the Force Science and the tactical community.
Pretty standard, accepted in the community?
Absolutely.
And is this what people have taught on?
Yes.
And is this kind of the, I remember the DPS officer that got accused of shooting the guy in the back, and after they went through that procedure, they discovered at the time the officer could figure out what he was going to do, pull the trigger, but at the time the bullet hit, he turned his back almost enough that he could hit him in the back. Those kind of studies, did that create a lot of this research? Because people were having a hard time believing that you don't just make a decision and it happens.
That's right. And so a good bit of research is done. Most of the research of this came from the 50s and traffic crash investigations. When y'all went through driver's ed, you heard about response time and lag time, that if you're driving a certain speed, you see a stoplight, it's going to take you a certain amount of time before you can even remove your foot from the throttle and put it over on the brake. So they've taken a lot of that research in traffic crashes, and now they've brought it over into uses of force with police officers.
But it became very important for the law enforcement community, for officers and trainers to understand this concept.
Absolutely.
That made a lot of sense to everybody that enjoyed this.
It does.
You don't need this to come down again. Do you have another, is there anything else on that particular exhibit that you think might be a benefit to?
No, I think.
This would be defense exhibit number 18. And can you tell the story? Did you prepare this particular exhibit?
That's right.
And what does it show? How will it help this jury?
Well, what we're doing now is we're taking what we've learned on the OODA loop, and we're applying it to this case here, this shooting. And what we've got, remember the timeline that the Fredericks report puts out. I'm putting these in half-second intervals along here, and they're represented by these diamonds. We're going from 5 minutes and 20 seconds all the way up to 5 minutes 23 seconds. These are all Officer Oliver's shots here. If we can go down here for just a minute. Again, this is the black is the time frame on the Fredericks report, and each one of these is Officer Oliver's shots and where they hit on this time frame. Now, if we use the times that we discussed here in the OODA loop, what we see is we take that second to a second and a half or more, and we apply it to this timeline. We know when Officer Oliver fired his first shot. It was right here. So what we need to figure out 2 points. The first point we need to figure out is when Officer Oliver made the decision to shoot, because that's what's important, not when the first shot was fired. When did Officer...
Why is that important?
Because that's when he was seeing what he was seeing. He says, based on what I'm seeing, I need to fire my weapon. Because we know now, the time he makes that observation and makes that decision, the action is following, and it's going to be offset. So what we've got here is we take this second to a second and third or more from this first shot, and we back it up. So these 2 green vertical lines, what we get here is kind of a range, kind of a time range of the area in which Officer Oliver made the observation and made his decision to fire his weapon. Because it takes that long to get from this area over to that first shot.
What is it? How long is that?
That's anywhere from a second to about a second and a third or longer. The second thing we have to figure out is when did Officer Oliver decide to stop shooting? That's critical. When did he decide to stop shooting? Same process. It takes about a second, maybe a second and a third or a second and a half or more for him to make the decision, I need to stop shooting now, and for him to actually stop shooting. And what's so sad, well, I'll get to that in just a minute. We do the same thing. We go to this last shot and we come forward. And it gives us an area here. Somewhere in this area, Officer Oliver decided, I need to stop shooting. I need to stop shooting now. The problem of it is, the abilities for humans to make decisions like this, it's like rolling a ping pong ball down a pipe. If you take the shoot ping pong ball and roll it down the pipe, and then the stop shooting ping pong ball and roll it down the pipe, even though both balls are in motion at the same time, the first ball you roll down the pipe, the shooting ball is going to come out first, and it's going to be followed by the stop shooting ball. Does that make sense?
These times, is this something you dreamed up, or is this something that came out of all this research?
No, this is peer-reviewed journal articles and research.
And something you were taught at Force Science?
Exactly. Yes,
And anybody that goes to Force Science, wouldn't they talk about the OODA? I mean, if they wanted to explain this, how else would you explain it other than the OODA?
I don't know how you could. You could just state the times, but the OODA loop is the process, and it just makes it a lot. It's easier to reference.
And these times, where did you get them?
I got it from Dr. Lewinsky. I've got them from other research. And again, literally in not just use of force research, but traffic research as well. These are human dynamics. Again, it's the same process in the grocery store. It's the same process when you're watching TV. You're fast forwarding through the commercial, right? And then what happens? The show comes on, and there's that delay between the start of the show and you hitting the stop button. Then you reverse it, and it goes back too far. So the new DVRs, if you'll notice, they do that automatically. They program this in. When you hit stop, it actually goes back a little bit, and then goes forward and plays. It's something.
All right, is that all the information you think is valuable at this point?
Yes, sir. What we know is the key here is the decision to fire wasn't made here. The decision to fire was made here about a second to a second and a third or longer before the first shot was fired. Similarly, the decision to stop shooting was made about a second to a second and a third or greater before that last shot was fired.
Of course, when I police officer makes the decision to fire, if the object is stationary, then we don't have a lot of controversy because nothing moves. In our situation, the decision to fire and the decision to stop firing, we have an object that's in movement, correct?
Yes, sir.
Does that make a difference in when you guys are looking at these use of cases?
Absolutely. It's a complicating factor because, as you state, it's not a stationary target, just standing there. It's a target in movement.
All right, is that all?
I think.
Thank you. Let's look at the defense exhibit 19. Come on down here. Now, can you tell us what this exhibit is and where you got these photographs?
Sure. This is Exhibit 19. These are photos taken.
There's 3 photographs.
3 photographs. And I'll just name them the top photograph, middle photograph, and the bottom photograph. These are taken from the Frederick's report. And I believe y'all have seen that video. Is that correct? So here's the timestamp that I was talking about, which is reflected on this chart.
This is exhibit 8.
Right there, 18. Defense Exhibit 18. So what we're doing now is we need to back that video up at a second to a second and a third to a second and a half and see where was the vehicle in relation to Officer Gross when Officer Oliver made the decision to fire. So what we've got here, and again, we're looking at the top photo. This is at the 1 second point. This is as fast as he can do it.
Okay. I don't think I understand. As fast as who can.
As fast as Officer Oliver can see that he needs to fire and actually fire the shot. He can do that in the minimum of a second, probably longer.
So we're talking about
That fast. Exactly. If we're looking at the minimum time, we look at this. Now, Mr. Fredericks has identified the front passenger side wheel right here. It's very difficult to see. But this is the headlight right here. And the significance of this is Officer Gross's body camera. So you can see that the headlight of the vehicle is towards Officer Gross's left. It's still in a position to where it can strike him. If we proceed down to a second and a third, the middle photograph, we can see here's the headlight again. It's actually a little farther to Officer Gross's left, and again in a position where we can strike him. Going out to 1.5 seconds, the bottom photograph, we see the headlight again right here, so it's still further away. So my point to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that somewhere here, and this is the picture, that this is the position of the car in relationship to Officer Gross that Officer Oliver was observing. That vehicle is, and by the way, folks, have y'all seen this down here?
that's exhibit 19.
19, I believe it is. Basically, the 3 photographs. The top photograph is at the 1 second point. Here is the vehicle, the Impala's headlight. And it's, again, towards Officer Gross's left. Officer Oliver's here, Officer Gross is here, but the Impala is here. If we push that back to 1.3 seconds, a second and a third, the Impala, here's the headlight, in the middle photograph is actually a little further away from Officer Gross. If we go to 1.5 seconds, it's still further to Officer Gross's left. In other words, it's in a position, it's coming forward, it's in a position where it can't strike him. What it's not is past him.
And how do you know that from your look, from what you're looking at, from the prosecutor's evidence that they're putting?
You take the spectrograph in in the Fredericks report, you have very clearly the timing of the shots. You apply the OODA loop and then the research that shows the timing.
Okay, now you're holding up defense exhibit 8.
So then what you do is you go to the video and you back that video up that amount of time. You back that video up a second, a third, or a second half, and say, okay, here's Officer Gross, where is the Impala? So what we know, in the time that Officer Oliver made the decision to fire, that Impala isn't past him. It's on the other side of him here, and it's coming in his direction.
Scientifically, does that say?
Yes, sir, it is.
Would that be what you would be taught in force science?
That would be what you'd be taught in force science. It's what you'd be taught in a larger sense in kinesiology. This isn't just something that Dr. Lewinsky cooked up in his lab. He's dealing with human reaction times that are well established in the world.
Is Lewinsky still doing even today doing more studies on this reaction?
Yes, sir, it is.
Still trying to perfect more what the human body can do to react?
To push out the literature. He's done research on how fast, if I'm seated in a car, something as simple as I can have a gun here, I'm seated in, let's say, the driver's seat, it takes a quarter of a second, if the officer is approaching here, it takes a quarter of a second for me to take this weapon, boom, and fire. And he does it in methodologically sound ways. In other words, he just doesn't take a couple of folks out in the back room and let's run through this. His methodology is sound, his research methods are sound, and that's what makes it science as opposed to I think.
Well, you did very excuse me, Dr. Hayden, say I don't believe in this force science, but all the work that I'm on. All right, do you have another exhibit?
We have a last one. Thank you so much.
And this would be the defense exhibit 20. And it is 3 photographs, top, middle, and bottom.
Very same idea here. Now, in defense exhibit 19, this is Officer Gross's body camera, and it shows the relationship of the Impala to Officer Gross. And here we're trying to establish the start shooting. Where was the Impala in relation to Officer Gross when Officer Oliver made the decision to start shooting? Same idea. This is Officer Oliver's. This is Officer Oliver's body-worn camera. And the question is, when did he make the decision to stop shooting? Okay? Same idea. Let's go to 1 second. Minimum time.
The top photograph.
I apologize. The top photograph. What we can see, and again, Mr. Frederickson is identified as the front passenger side wheel right here. So as you can
And that's the information that he put in his report.
he put that, I did not put that in. So as Officer Oliver is firing his weapon, he makes the decision to stop firing when the Impala is actually to his left. If we push that decision to 1.3 seconds, which is entirely possible, and yet here's the headlight of the Impala is further to his left. And here at 1.5 seconds, it's even further still. We can go down here. People probably feel they're neglected down here. Same ideas we had in defense 19. At 1 second, and again, these are all Officer Oliver's body-worn camera. Okay? Here's the front passenger side wheel of the Impala. So what we can see here is 1 second away from him making when he made the decision to stop shooting. Here was the Impala. It was to his left. It was not past him. It was to his left. We can back this up 1.3. Here's the headlight. And it's even further, again, to Officer Oliver's left. And it's traveling this way. It's coming from both officers' left. It's traveling with both officers' right. So he's making the decision to stop shooting before the car ever gets to him.
And that just doesn't seem possible, but all the research that comes.
It's solid science. It's solid science.
Let me ask you something. Just may I ask you that here? If I'm Officer Oliver and say, there's a car, Officer Gross, you heard Officer Oliver Coons' testimony, was he in an appropriate position as a backup officer for Gross?
He was getting there. He was coming up on line with Officer Gross so he could see the vehicle.
Have any problem with that?
No,
Good police work?
I believe so, because what he didn't want to do is go on to his left and do a blue on blue.
Okay, thank you. Might as well sit down. Dr. Lewinsky has continued, I think, spoke in terms of the Tempe study. Do you remember him saying that?
Yes, sir.
But anyway, Dr. Lewinsky did a study in Tempe that Dr. David.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, Judge, at this time I'm going to offer what we've had marked for identification. That's defense exhibits 17, 18, 19, and 20 as defense exhibits 17, 18, 19.
For all purposes.
For all purposes.
Objection?
Yes, sir.
Objection, go to.
Is 17 through 20 inclusive or admitted for all purposes? Published. Read to the game.
Captain, anytime an officer in your command or you is involved in a shooting, it's a terrible event.
Yes, sir, it is.
That you found an officer who basically, and any normal human would be, when they're going to kind of a state of shock.
Yes, sir.
And you train that out of them?
No. It's a horrible thing to be involved in.
And after it's over, do officers, some officers react differently than others, and some are not as emotional as some are.
Yes, sir.
But the bottom line is that the department and the officer and everybody involved, the family of the individual that's been tragically shot, and the officer that's done what he thought was reasonable in his responsibility. It's all the way around tragedy.
It is, and ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, this is probably one of the saddest cases I've ever worked, all the way around. This family has lost from everything I've heard, a wonderful young man. It's terrible. It is beyond terrible.
So once again, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Roy Oliver, when he made that decision to shoot, and the result of that shoot was reasonable?
Yes, it was. And the decision of Officer Oliver to fire his weapon at that time was reasonable because, as we can see, when we run the human elements, the human dynamics and reaction, we can see from the point of the first shot back that impala was in a position to strike Officer Gross. And it was not past him.
You looked at Oliver's training records and the journal orders of Officer, or anything that you wanted to look at, we would suggest you review certain things, you've seen them all.
Yes, sir.
That's all I've got, Judge. I've got so much.
We're going to shut down for the day. I can finish by 5. All right. Yes, up to you, Mr. Snipes.
I'd like to finish one.
Go ahead, then. Cross-examination, Mr. Snipes. You may proceed when ready.
Hey, Captain, you said that the decision to shoot was a second and a third before Oliver got up to the call, right?
I didn't say that. No,
What did you
sir.
say?
What I said is the decision to shoot was made at a minimum of 1 second to a second and a third, perhaps a second and a half or greater before the shot was fired.
Okay. And you know that the glass was broken out 0.358 seconds before that first shot.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So the decision to shoot had been made before the glass was broken out.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
The decision to shoot was made before Gross got to the car.
How do you mean got to the car?
when he broke the glass out.
I can tell you the time regarding Officer Oliver, between the time he made his decision and the shot was fired, and I can place the pallet. Now, what I have a little more difficult time doing, excuse me, if you'd let me finish my question, thank you, or my answer, thank you.
Objection.
Objection sustained.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The point is, according to you,
Yes, sir.
the decision to shoot was made before the glass was broken out.
Yes, sir.
All right. And so you heard Officer Oliver's, the defendant's testimony, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you remember him saying that glass being broken out was part of his decision-making process and firing that first shot? You remember that testimony?
What he said is that he fired the first shot based on the fact that the vehicle was going to hit Officer Gross.
Do you remember him saying that he took into account that glass breaking out as part of his decision on his first shot, Captain?
He did say that, however, keep in mind, in high-stress situations...
Judge, objection.
Objection sustained.
Okay.
Now, you talked all this stuff about forced signs. You were in here when Dr. Hayden testified, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were in here when Dr. Hayden said he took all that forced sign stuff into account when he made the opinion that these shots were totally unreasonable. Did you hear him saying that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you would agree that the evidence in this case shows that the defendant had 9 seconds from the time that he started running before he fired his first shot.
There were approximately 9 seconds from the time that Officer Oliver retrieved his patrol rifle to the time the first shot was fired.
That's incorrect, sir. You retrieved the rifle at 23:18:10, and the first shot was 27 seconds later. You started running at 23:18:28. 9 seconds later was the first shot. You want to change your answer?
I'd have to review the video again, but we'll take that as a hypothetical, sure.
Okay. And you heard the testimony from Grant Fredericks that the wheels had turned to the left into the northbound lane, crossed the center lane, and away from Officer Gross, and away from the defendant. You heard that testimony?
From Grant Fredericks?
Yes.
I did not, no, sir.
Okay. And you know the first 2 shots were perpendicular shots fired after the car had passed by Officer Gross.
Yes, sir.
The last 3 shots, 3, 4, 5, after the car had passed by the defendant.
Yes, sir.
You know that Gross never fired.
Yes, sir.
You know that he said he was never in fear for his life,
That's correct.
and that he acknowledges the car turned away from him.
Don't know that part, no.
Okay? So you're saying that the first shot that the defendant, Roy Oliver, fired was reasonable.
Yes, sir.
The second shot that Roy Oliver fired was reasonable.
Yes, sir.
The third shot that Roy Oliver fired was reasonable.
Yes, sir.
The fourth shot that Roy Oliver fired was reasonable.
Yes, sir.
The fifth shot that Roy Oliver fired was reasonable.
Yes, sir.
So is that, I guess Jordan Edwards is just a casualty of the war on crime? Is that your testimony?
Oh, not at all, sir. And that's a terrible thing to insinuate.
Okay. Have you ever testified in a case against a police officer? You haven't, have you?
I've testified in civil service hearings against police officers, yes.
Okay. In a criminal case?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
That's right. No is the answer. And you got a website where you advertise things to try and get business, correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it a fact that even before you came down here today to give your testimony, you were already advertising your testimony in this very case?
I was involved in this case.
And you were already advertising, yes or no?
It was placed on my website along with all the other cases I've worked.
That's all I got to do.
Captain, you, of course, all experts like you, y'all all advertise all the cases you've been involved in, and the lawyers that want to hire you need to know about the cases you've been involved in. Standard procedure.
Yes, sir. It's also verse 26.
Yeah, You have to do that, don't you?
Yes, sir.
When an officer is involved in a shooting, though, I've heard the term tunnel vision. What does that mean?
When a person's under stress, you lose your peripheral vision. Your vision narrows down to approximately 2 to 4 degrees. I've experienced this myself in the last shooting I was involved with. And what that means is you're literally, it's like looking through a toilet paper tube. You're just not seeing the things around you. So what you're not going to see is something, I don't disagree that the wheels may have been turning. Officer Oliver was never going to see that.
And that's a phenomenon that is well documented. It's called tunnel vision.
Yes, sir.
And especially difficult for officers involved in critical incidents.
Yes, sir.
It's not uncommon for two officers to see something that's happening in front of them, and both of them have a different opinion, is it?
No, not at all. In fact, it's not uncommon for officers involved in shootings. They're asked, how many shots did you fire? They say, I fired 2 rounds. The investigation shows they fired 10, 12, 14 rounds, maybe reloaded. The recollection can be a little dicey due to that stress. So they can make those mistakes, and that's what I was trying to point out to Mr. Snipes.
Assume for a moment that 5th shot hit the concrete. That's the way the testimony we heard and hear from the expert. What would that mean to you as far as the position of Oliver's AR-15 at that point?
What that would mean to me is he was reacting, he was under stress. When you're under stress, you revert to your training. What's his training? When you finish firing the rifle, you bring it down into what's called a Sewell position. And that's what he was doing on that 5th shot. He was actually bringing the rifle down. When that 5th shot was fired, it hit the pavement and ricocheted up into the rocker mound.
And what is the important part about going to a critical incident team, an excessive force team getting out there? Don't they want to know how many bullets or shells are left in the magazine?
Yes, sir.
And why is that?
You want to document how many rounds were fired. It's just part of the investigation.
But I mean, if you have 30 in the round in your magazine and you shoot 5 or 4, what does that mean? Were you in control or not in control?
Well, that would be a case-by-case basis.
Well, I know, but I mean, an indication to an investigator that if you had the ability to shoot 30 rounds but you only shot 5 would mean that you felt that the threat had passed. Would that be true?
That's correct.
That's all I'm trying to ask.
Very good. May this witness be finally excused?
Please.
Yes, sir. Very good. Sir, you may stand down. You can excuse from any further service in this matter.
Thank you.
Mr. Mason? Pardon me, sir. Members of the jury, let me give you some instructions. Please do not do any independent research. Don't discuss this case with anybody else. Please don't drive by the locations that you've heard about. Pull up anything on any websites or anything else. If you will, go back and wait with the sheriff. Don't leave just yet because I'll have further instructions for you in the back. All rise for the jurors.